as Manitoba heads into the fall provincial election. All three of my children went through public school, went to Vincent Massey Collegiate in Fort Garry. All three of them thrived, one achieving presidency of the Student Council, went on to post-secondary education, and it's because there are very positive experiences in the public school system that they are here and they succeed today. So I wanted to personally thank you for what you do, and what you do matters. Now, some could say that that's, a talk show host pandering to his audience. And we might hear a little bit of that, but I'm expecting to hear from our candidates substance. We're early in the campaign, and not all the parties have made their policy platforms, but my job here is to moderate, but hopefully coax a little bit more policy issues and ideas out of our participants. Each will have precisely 2 minutes to respond to each question, and I'll remind them of this. Following the responses, each participant will have 1 minute for rebuttals, and again, as moderator, I ask our candidates respect those times. I will, of course, grant some leeway for you to finish your responses, but I will intervene if necessary. Now, these procedures clearly communicated to participants in advance of the forum, and so please, let's bring all three of our candidates, Mr. Altemeyer, Mr. Owasco, and Mr. McIntyre. Please all come forward. Thank you again. Apparently it's a scramble for the podiums. No, they all know where to go. That happened once.
Rock, paper, scissors.
As you are aware, the order in which you will be making your opening and closing statements, as well as the order in which you'll respond and rebut to each question, was drawn random ballot in advance. So we will begin with the opening statements, and that begins 2 minutes to Mr. Nello Altemeyer, the Manitoba New Democratic Party.
Well, thank you, Richard. Is the mic on? Yes? Good. Well, thank you, Richard, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nello Altemeyer. I am the MLA for Transcona in the last 4 years. I've served as official opposition critic for K-12 education and early childhood learning. And now with the election around the corner, I'm excited to be on Wab Kinew's team as he runs to be the next Premier of Manitoba on October 3rd. Before beginning a career in politics, I was a teacher, school leader for 33 years up in Northeast Winnipeg. You know me, and you know where our Manitoba NDP team stands on public education. You know where we stand on feeding kids who come to school hungry. And you know where the PCs stand on that. You know where we stand on class sizes. They need to be smaller so you can spend less time managing a crowd and more one-on-one time with that kid that needs that extra help. You know where we stand on stable, predictable funding for schools, not cuts. And you know where Heather Stephenson and the PCs stand on public education and their approach to public education. Cuts, underfunding, overcrowded classrooms, fewer teachers, fewer EAs, fewer librarians. That's their legacy. A government that has failed to deal with also the scourge of childhood poverty. And of course, the scourge that was Bill 64. We need a new approach to public education in Manitoba. I'm proud to be on the team with Wab Kinew and our NDP colleagues who are excited to offer this new vision. I look forward to engaging with you during this forum and a productive dialogue with all participants. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. With the Manitoba Liberal Party, Mr. Ian McIntyre.
Thank you. My name is Ian McIntyre. I'm a retired teacher and the Manitoba Liberal candidate for Kildonan River East. I'm a life member of the Manitoba Teacher Society and a former president of the Manitoba Teacher Society, and some of you may recognize me as co-chair of Provincial Council a few years ago. The Manitoba Teacher Society was an integral part of my life, and it is near and dear to my heart. I want to welcome my colleagues, Nello and Wayne. I appreciate you being here up on stage. Manitoba Liberals stand for a strong public education system. When the Pallister-Stephenson government threatened education with Bill 64, it was the Manitoba Liberals who first made the call to kill the bill. Dougal Lamont, our leader, has set a course to deliver a program for every child to be reading by the end of grade 2. A Manitoba Liberal government will establish K-2 programs to screen, diagnose, and implement early interventions for students with learning disabilities and gaps. And we will fund it to make it happen. We will provide stable and equitable funding so that schools can get back on track and continue to provide the quality education throughout Manitoba. We will reestablish the Assistant Deputy Minister of Education position with responsibilities for le Bureau de l'Éducation français, with committed funding to restore and expand BEF. We will deliver universal child health care, a nutrition program for schools, move some of the psychological assessments and therapies from schools to the Manitoba medical system to ease the backlog on schools and reduce the burdens on family. We will address ventilation and air quality in schools, as highlighted during COVID, and act on a plan for air conditioning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. From the Manitoba Progressive Conservative Party, Mr. Wayne Owasco.
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. And as you may know, I'm Wayne Owasco and I'm the MLA for the Lac Tabani constituent and also the PC candidate looking to be re-elected in Lac Tabani. I've had the honor of being your Education and Early Childhood Learning Minister for the last 20 months and the MLA for Lac Tabani since 2011. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here this afternoon on behalf of our leader of the Progressive Conservative team, Heather Stephenson, and all of our PC candidates with the Progressive Conservative team. I grew up on a small farm southwest of Beausejour, Manitoba, married my wife Tracy, and had 2 wonderful sons, all of whom have attended public education. We, here in this room, are far more alike than you think. This September, in a couple weeks, would have started my 30th year in education. Out of my 17 years of teaching, 12 were spent in student services area, working with students with special needs, being a guidance counselor, helping students with social, emotional, and behavior challenges, as well as helping with careers, helping with career and post-secondary guidance. And I absolutely left it in 2011 when I was loving it. I've seen the different sides of educational world, so I do have an understanding of what happens for our students. We all want them to get the best education possible, to have a great start in life, no matter where they live in this great province of ours, their cultural background, or their own individual circumstances. We can all agree that in order for students to reach success, we need all education partners working together. Children whose parents are involved in their education tend to demonstrate higher academic achievement, which in turn helps with their attendance, attitude, and behavior, which in turn makes stronger students, which will help us all in our classrooms in the education system. I'm here today to answer some questions about education, how we can fund it, how we will improve it, but I also want to invite everyone to contribute and continue to collaborate and consult with our PC team as we've done so in the last 7 years. Thank you, merci, and miigwech.
Let's get to the questions. Each will have 2 minutes for the responses, followed by a 1-minute rebuttal. And we'll begin this round with Mr. McIntyre, followed by Mr. Altomare, and followed by Mr. Owasco, and then there'll be rebuttals. As we look ahead to the provincial election on October 3rd, we gather here today to discuss one of the most crucial aspects of our society, that being public education. The future of our province lies in the hands of our students, and it is essential to ensure that they receive the highest quality education as possible. With that in mind, I present the following question to our distinguished panel of politicians. Funding and resource allocation have been critical issues in Manitoba's education system. How will you prioritize and allocate resources to ensure that schools in all communities receive adequate support for growing and challenging needs and those changing needs so that all students have equal access to quality education regardless of their socioeconomic background or geographical location? Again, we begin 2 minutes with Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Richard. Students, first thing in the morning, or even at lunchtime, cannot work if they don't have a proper meal. And so one of the first things that a Liberal government is going to do is introduce a nutrition program through an already established program that's working within the city and within some of the rural areas, and that has been successful. So we want to provide a universal nutrition program for all students attending school. Secondly, equity is an issue. There are some programs, for example, the IDEA program that the Pallister-Stephenson government introduced, which pitted one school division against another school division to get money. That's done. That's gone. We're not going to do that. If there are good ideas, we want the good ideas to be at all schools. And we will fund programs that are going to give the opportunities to areas that don't have the resources, and so when they have the resources, they're going to be excelling. And the third issue is going to be our grade 1 to 2 program to identify any kind of disability or gap for students, plus putting in the interventions and long-term interventions if necessary, so that these students are going to be able to excel not only at the beginning but also at the end of their career in school. I've seen too often students who have had gaps in their learning, who have become disenchanted with school, who are sapped of their spirit, and who are no longer interested in being there because we just didn't get to them on time.
Time.
And that's 3 priorities, I think, or 4 priorities that we have, and I thank you for that.
Appreciate that. Thank you so very much. Mr. Altamare.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Ian, for that response as well. Gives us a good idea of where the Liberal Party stands. You certainly know where the Manitoba NDP stands. Smaller class sizes. That has to happen. We had the cap on K-3 classroom sizes. That needs to be reinstituted. But it can't be at the expense of having larger class sizes on down the line. So we will ensure that class sizes remain manageable so that you can get to that child that needs that extra support. We know now, coming out of the pandemic, how much kids missed being in school. They missed us. They missed us terribly. And they need to have support so that they can know how to be back in a classroom and be properly supported when they're there. That's our #1 job. That's something that we take very seriously. The Manitoba NDP team does take that very seriously. So seriously, in fact, that we came up with Bill 222, the nutrition program bill, that will have schools reporting what program, nutrition-wise, they provide to their students, so that we can have a real plan moving forward and deal with this once and for all. The other thing we need is stable, predictable funding of our public schools based on a formula that is equitable. Now, you know the Poverty and Education Task Force came out with their report in February of 2023. One of the very first things that they said was, we need to have a common definition of what equity looks like in our schools. So let's get to work on that. That'll be one of the first things that we do. Come up with that common definition so we can support our kids, families, and communities, because they're going to need it. The other piece is, of course, respecting the front line, our people in the classrooms every day. I know what that's like. I know what it's like to help that kid, to help that family, to help our communities, and we are committed to do that. Myself, Wap Canoe, and the Manitoba NDP team.
Thank you very
Richard.
much. Mr. Owasco.
Thanks, Richard. And I believe the question was on funding, sustainability, equity, and fairness. So when we take a look at funding, initially, we all know in this room that the Manitoba PC government has increased funding to education by 23% since we formed government. That's $100 million just in this school year, 23-24 alone, which is a 6.1% increase, which is a historical funding increase in over 40 years in Manitoba. Feel free to fact check it. It's bang on. Former Education Minister Peter Bjornson, the NDP minister, talked about his historical funding back in 2007, largest in over 25 years. This, my friends and colleagues, is the largest in over 40 years. But it's not just about the amount of money. It's about how do we get it to the students, how do we get it to you as teachers to make sure that it's fair and equitable. Under the former NDP, keep in mind that the sector has been calling for a funding model review for over 20 years. This is not something that is easy, that's going to be done overnight. We're doing collaboration, we're doing consultations with school divisions, making sure that we're getting it right. Because you know what? Mark my words, if it was easy, the NDP would have done it in their 17 years, but they didn't get it done. We're getting it done. We're going to be rolling out a new funding model as soon as those consultations with each and every school division is done. But also keep in mind that with that funding, we want to make sure that student success all across this great province of ours is seen from and not based on education due to where they live. We want to make sure that in Transcona, in Lac Tabani, in Point Douglas, in Thompson, each and every student in this great province of ours should have access to equal and fair funding for their education to make sure that they can succeed moving forward in life.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
I remember one of my earliest debates that I chaired, I said, you know, no applause, no hissing, that type of stuff. And then people started coughing. And it took me a couple of questions to kind of carry on that they were coughing. Anyway, so please respect all our candidates. We have 1 minute rebuttals beginning with Mr. Altsmeyer.
Thank you, Richard. I'll remind the minister on his record on funding public education. It's been cuts and underfunding since 2016. Everyone in this room has felt it. Everyone sees it every day. And they're getting ready to go back into a classroom again, underfunded and cut it. So here's the record. Winnipeg School Division, $5 million, forcing cuts to nutrition and their full-day kindergarten program. Pembina Trails School Division, Pembina Trails had to cut their full-day kindergarten program. River East Transcona, the second largest school division in the province, had to borrow money this year just to keep it rolling. That is a terrible legacy. That is one that is on your government and one that we will clean up, because this can't keep on happening, and we're going to make sure that it doesn't. And this is what we'll be doing as of October 4th. Thank you, Richard.
1 minute, Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you. I don't need to talk about the funding legacy of the Pallister-Stephenson government. We all know. We all lived it. We're still living it. We're going to be living it again in September. But it's rich coming from the NDP that they're talking about funding when, in fact, they fought for months in the ledge to stop the rebate on your property tax, and now have adopted it as one of their planks. They're going to keep that in place, which is going to force an NDP government, if elected, to borrow $400 million a year in order to fund education. The Manitoba Liberals have a plan to fund education. We will be announcing and turning that out in a costed funded platform in the very near future, and I look forward to hearing what people have to say at that time.
And that's time. Thank you. Too bad you couldn't, like, all three of you announce your education platforms today. That would have been cool.
There you go.
Mr. Owasco, 1 minute.
Thanks, Richard. Only 1 minute?
Only 1 minute.
Okay, thanks,
I got
sir.
the bell.
He's got the bell. So thanks, everyone. And as you've heard from my two colleagues, they have no plan. They have no plan on how they're going to fund education. We know through public consultations with all of you, education partners, we know what is important to you. We know that the new funding formula is very important. These two to my left and their leaders have not come out with how they are going to fund education. Bottom line. As Mr. McIntyre has mentioned, we are hearing from the NDP that their plan is to do what the Progressive Conservatives are already doing, which they didn't do in their 17 years. So I'm not quite sure what kind of plan that is. And in regards to the Liberal plan, in regards to squashing the Idea Fund, I'm a big believer of reaching out to the grassroots and listening to the educators who are front lines each and every day, and to get those rock-solid ideas that can be imitated and duplicated throughout this great province of ours to make sure that all of our students are receiving success.
Thank you. I would really like to hear at some point in the rebuttals, actually rebuttaling. You were accused by Mr. Altomare of allowing and facilitating school divisions to make some cuts that they didn't want to. So
you want to give me another minute?
You know what? The really good candidates find that minute in the next question. So we'll see whether or not we got really good candidates here. Learning conditions in question 2 are working conditions that are directly I've been at this for a few years. We know from our November 2022 membership poll that 86% of teachers are experiencing stress. Wow, what a number. In the 2021 poll, 15% of members said they were considering early retirement. Manitoba is already experiencing a shortage of certified teachers. We simply cannot afford to lose any more. Here's the question. How do you propose to improve teacher working conditions by addressing factors such as workload, inadequate funding, violence in the classroom in order to attract and retain highly skilled certified educators in our public schools? Mr. Owasco, interestingly enough, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard, and thank you to MTS for that question. In regards to any type of recruitment, retention, and workload issues that we're having here in Manitoba, you may all know that we came up with the STK strategy, the Skills, Talent, Knowledge strategy. It's looking at the labor market, what is happening right here in this great province of ours, and working closely with not only our education partners, but also our post-secondary institutions to make sure that we're finding ways to become more nimble and flexible in order to offer the training opportunities up. We know that Manitoba is not the only jurisdiction that is suffering from this. And I'm also really concerned with the fact that many of you are hitting that stress level that I don't think should necessarily be on you. The level of funding, the 23% increase since we formed government, is factual. You can go check it out. And the $100 million that we've put in, we've also put in the $106 million on top of the $100 million to make sure that it's baked right into the base funding. But you can't just continue throwing money into that old formula like the NDP want to do, and I'm not sure what the Liberals want to do. So you have to come up with that new funding formula to make sure what are the challenges that are out there. Transportation, deferred maintenance. The NDP were famous for leaving the deferred maintenance for over 17 years when they were in government to not fix anything. You don't want to know why? Because it's not really that sexy to go do a ribbon cutting on tarring a roof. The NDP left it. We're fixing the mess that they've left for us. Just another quick point on recruitment and retention. Other jurisdictions across Canada, but I had the pleasure of representing Canada on education in the G7 in Japan just in May. This is happening all around the world. So it's working with partnerships with other countries to then encourage people to come and teach right here in this great province, because we have a lot to offer other teachers from around the world.
Mr. Owasco, appreciate the time. Thanks so very much. 2 minutes. Mr. Altomare, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Richard. I'll just say this. How many of you are feeling the impact of this so-called increase in funding? Yeah, exactly. We have to consult with the people and all stakeholders in the field. That's the only way we get this done. I will say that every jurisdiction is indeed finding it difficult to recruit teachers, especially here in Manitoba. We have Frontier School Division that has to offer a $10,000 bonus to get people to go up there, to attract the necessary human resources so that their kids can flourish in their classrooms. That's what it's all about. We need to do that and take it seriously. Right now, we're seeing unprecedented levels of stress in our classroom because they're underfunded. How many people here have experienced kids showing up in their classrooms without the supports that they need? Everybody here has felt that. We know that. Why? We have seen cuts to EAs, cuts to teachers, cuts to clinical services. That is the number one thing that still remains on top of our agenda here for the Manitoba NDP, to deal with this clinical shortage that we have. Because there's no way that we're going to be able to help kids that require that extra help unless we have all of those support pieces in place. This will be important. This will be an important piece of our platform. But ultimately, if we're not talking to teachers, if we're not talking to school divisions, if we're not talking to parents, if we're not talking to communities and rural municipalities, we won't be able to get it done. We have to do more of it because we know the challenges that we're facing every day. Everybody in this room has the energy to do the work. What they need is they need a government that works with them together to get it done in our classrooms. Thank you, Richard.
2 minutes, Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you. First of all, let me acknowledge, and on behalf of the Manitoba Liberal Party, let me acknowledge the work that you're doing over COVID and the many changes, rules, new rules, even more changes, even more rules, and you're here today representing teachers. I give you a round of applause because this is incredible. I'm glad you're so committed. But that doesn't solve the underfunding problem that we face in our schools. How are you going to trust these two organizations, these two parties, to fix what they broke? They have consistently failed over decades to address the needs of students in the classroom, to address teacher salary. And so let's hope that this round of negotiations, which I understand you're going to get some information on this afternoon, is going in the right direction. But the students are the ones who are suffering all of these losses. And we have to change that around. We are committing to long-term stable funding. I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't want to give you a number and then have it, oh, well, no, that wasn't the number that you said. Because we have to look at the books and then we have to look at where it's going to come from. But I can tell you, it's not going to come from sending a check on property taxes to Galen Weston. And the Conservatives' only change in that plan is instead of mailing it out, it's going to be a direct deposit. So they're just keeping it the same. And the NDP have bought into this. That's, like I said, part of their plank. They're not going to be able to get it done. We have innovative ways in which I've already spoke about and will speak more of. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 1 minute rebuttals, beginning with Mr. Altamare.
Well, thank you, Richard. I want to remind everybody in here that, yes, we're in an affordability crisis right now, and that is why we're going to maintain that rebate for this upcoming year. It's an important piece. It's something that Manitoba needs right now because of what this government's created here. They've created an affordability crisis in this province, and we're all feeling it. That's going to be our response to that. Obviously, right now, we have to come up with a plan that is equitable in our funding. We know the Poverty and Education Task Force has already done the work on this. We now have to implement what's been put in place and what's on the record there, released in 2023. I've yet to hear anything from either party on this stage regarding the work of that task force. It was important work. It came out of the K-12 Commission. And this is why we need to get going on this. Thank you, Richard.
Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you. We're going to give divisions the autonomy and the ability to enact bonus programs like the one in Frontier School Division so that if they need to attract teachers and retain staff, they will have the ability to do that. We also want benefits for teachers so that when they do have concerns and when they do have that mental health crisis, that the long-term disability plan of the Manitoba Teacher Society is going to be there for you. My opponents are my opponents want to say, oh, look, we millions and millions and millions of dollars. We have to be equitable. We have to look at the equity, and we have to look at where we need to build equity first before we can do anything else.
Thank you very much. Mr. Owasco. 1 minute.
Thanks, Richard. And it looks like they were getting a resounding applause for the Progressive Conservative plan on doing the funding model review, because I'm not hearing anything coming out of either one of these two individuals' parties. We know that fairness and equitable funding to all of our students all across this great province of ours is very, very important, and that's why we're taking the collaborative consultative approach to getting that done. It's not an easy topic. We all know that. We've been living through it as teachers for decades now. We need to make sure that we're getting it right. $1.6 billion over the last 4 years. This coming fall, you'll get a report that's probably going to see the $1.6 billion guarantee in 2019. We've exceeded that and probably closer to $1.8 billion. That's on top of the $100 million that we've put to funding this year for 23-24. But as Mr. McIntyre says...
Time.
Oh, okay, that was a
Goes by
quick minute.
quickly. Yeah.
Thanks, Richard.
Goes by quickly.
I'll finish that up after.
Yeah, I want you to.
If you're just joining us on YouTube, my name is Richard Kluche from 680 CJOB. We're before about 110, 120 people here at the Delta. It's the Manitoba Teachers Society. Mr. Nello Altemeyer is with the Manitoba New Democratic Party. He's on the far left. Dr. Wayne Owasco is here right next to me from Manitoba Progressive Conservative Party. And Mr. Ian McIntyre is in the middle from the Manitoba Liberal Party. Question 3, and we've seen evidence of this as most recently in Saskatchewan yesterday, and we'll get Mr. Owasco to begin the responses for 2 minutes. Globally, in recent years, we've witnessed a concerning surge in far-right views and hate crimes. In Manitoba, we have seen an increase in anti-2SLGBTQIA+ movements ranging from calls to ban books, to vandalism and violence targeting members of the community. In an increasingly polarized world, fostering an environment where diverse opinions and ideas can peacefully coexist, well, this is becoming a very pressing concern. Recent events have highlighted the challenges in balancing teacher autonomy to select resources while promoting inclusive and equitable learning materials. Gentlemen, what strategies will you implement to promote teacher autonomy and expertise while ensuring curriculum materials reflect diverse perspectives and promote respect for all? Let's begin. 2 minutes, Mr. Owasco.
Thanks, Richard, and it is a very important topic. As I said in my opening statement, there's many things that we as classroom teachers see on a day-to-day basis with our students. And we know and I must say, my colleagues to the left of me, one not as far as the other, have all seen it within their workplaces as well. We all work quite closely to try to get parents more and more involved in their students' education. Because we all believe, and I know that many of you in this room agree, because you're parents as well, that stronger families equal stronger students, which then in turn helps us in the classrooms. In regards to some of the questions that you see out there, in regards to some of the posts that have been posted by New Democrat candidates, it's unfortunate that they're building a culture of division as opposed to unity. It is about getting parents more involved in their kids' education, parents or guardians, because we do feel that education doesn't just stop in the classroom, and I know that many of you work hard far beyond those hours in the classroom to think of various ideas on how we can get students engaged and present into the building. That's why in 2017, we also came up with the Supporting Transgender, Gender Diverse Students in Manitoba Schools document in 2017. So I don't want to take any lessons from the New Democratic Party, who had 17 years to get some of the things done, which they left undone. We're getting it done on behalf of students, on behalf of teachers, and behalf of parents. Thank you.
2 minutes, Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you. There's no way that the Pallister-Stephenson government is getting it done if the Premier of this province is saying that it's up to parents to decide what the pronouns of their children are. If children are afraid to talk to their parents about their gender, about their questions, about their ideas, that leaves very few people, and that goes back to the teacher. If the government, as we've seen in Saskatchewan, has to mandate pronouns, there's a problem. What is family? Families come in all shapes, sizes, differences, colors. 2 dads, 1 dad, 2 mums, 1 mum, foster parents, everything. Protecting the rights of LGBTQ 2S plus kids is our responsibility, as well as the government's responsibility, and the Manitoba Liberal Party takes that seriously. Allowing kids to flourish and use whatever pronouns they need to use is the right thing to do. Protecting the privacy of those kids is the right thing to do. And letting kids read whatever they want is the right thing to do. Thank you.
2 minutes, Mr. Altmaier.
Well, thank you, Richard. You know, I was surprised last week when I heard that announcement from the Premier regarding parental rights. I was surprised because all of us on this stage have worked in schools. All of us here in this room work in schools. We already know what the Public Schools Act says regarding that. Those pieces are in place. I would have liked to have heard the Premier reiterate that last week when she made that announcement. What already exists in the Public Schools Act. We're already required to inform parents when guests are in our classroom. We know through consent forms that if parents want, they can pull their kids out of sensitive topics. They know that. We all know that in this room. But here's the piece. With all of us that have worked in schools, including the people here on stage, kids have divulged a lot to us. Why do they do that? Because they trust us. Parents see us as trusted partners. The best work I ever did in schools is when we were working with parents, working with our communities to help their kids flourish in school. That's the piece that needs to be advertised. That's the piece that needs to get out there. That's what we need to remind all of us of. We're doing the work. We take it seriously. We also take seriously the safety of our kids. Absolutely. That is always at the forefront. I also want to acknowledge, yes, that piece, that bill in 2017, it's important because it built on the work of the GSAs that we did earlier in government. That was a really important step. Why? Because the child is centered in all of this dialogue, in all of this stuff that we do at schools. It's very important. Thank you.
Thanks very much. 1 minute rebuttals, beginning with Mr. McIntyre.
Well, what can I say that I haven't already said? We are entrusted with the safety of students. We are entrusted with making sure that students flourish. And our job is to make sure that, or should be, that if a student wants to be who they are, who are we to stop them? We can live with many different types of students in our classroom, and we'll continue to do so. The dog whistles and the negative stuff on Twitter and everywhere else, forget about it. Let's just get on with work.
Thank you. Mr. Altmaier, 1 minute.
Thank you, Richard. I just want to say that all of us in this room take pride in creating those working relationships with our families. It's very important. We can't be successful without working with families together to help kids to ensure that they get what they need at school. That's why we're trusted partners with them. That has to be something I know it will continue. It's one of the best pieces of my career, was working with families and working with the communities that our schools were in. This is something that you do every day. Reaching out, ensuring that the kid's all right, checking in, providing those gloves when they need it, providing that extra snack when they need it, providing the love and support when they need it. We all know that. Early, middle, seniors. And we take it very seriously and will continue to do so. Because
Thank you.
everyone on this stage believes that. I truly believe that.
Thank you. Mr. Wasco?
Thanks, Richard, and I'd like to thank my two colleagues to the left of me for their responses. So the Progressive Conservatives, what we've promised is to modernize and formalize the Enhanced Rights for Parents in the Public Schools Act. It's going to be the first time in over 30 years. Former MTS President Diane Beresford absolutely put the stamp of approval on it way back in the day. We know times have changed. We see it in our classrooms. We see it in our communities. Parents want to be more involved. If you're taking what the Liberals are saying, they're going to try to keep everything a secret from parents. From the NDP, it's almost sounding like it's along the same vein. Parents are asking for enhanced rights. We're hearing it at the doors, all across Winnipeg, all across Manitoba. We're going to follow a broad consultation with parents and educators. A re-elected PC party is going to add to the existing rights, and we're going to make sure that we're doing it in the two C words that the NDP don't like: collaboration and consultations with educators and parents.
Just want to
Thank
be
you.
sure here, because I have a duty to make sure that we're clear on this. So a New Brunswick and a Saskatchewan doesn't happen here? Are all three of you in agreement that that doesn't happen if this is a re-elected Progressive Conservative government? What happened yesterday in Saskatchewan does not happen here?
So what I can tell you, Richard, is that we're not making any policy changes. We're taking a look at the Schools Act, and we are enhancing those rights and modernizing it because it has not been looked at for 30 years.
All right, 30 more seconds here to Mr. Altsmeyer. Are you confident that that's not going to happen here?
That won't happen with an NDP government.
Liberals?
It will absolutely not happen with a Manitoba Liberal government.
So, Mr. Iwasko, you're saying it's not going to happen, or we'll wait till the consultations?
I've already answered the question, Richard, and we're going to be consulting and collaborating. We are not making any policy changes.
All right, thank you. Just wanted to clarify that for the room and those who are joining us on YouTube. Question number 4. The Manitoba Teachers Society represents 16,600 public school educators across the province, 104-year history, relationships with provincial governments that range from collaborative to combative and everything in between. What is your perspective on the role of MTS in public education, and how do you envision fostering a constructive relationship between the union and the government to ensure the best possible outcomes for both students and teachers? We begin with Mr. Altsmeyer. 2 minutes on this question. Go ahead, please.
Well, thank you, Richard. It's an important relationship, obviously, because, these are the teachers. This is the front line. These are the people that do the work every day. What you need to have is a real partner in a provincial government that's with you every step of the way, instead of putting up roadblocks every step of the way. What you're going to get with us is you're going to get real consultation, real collaboration. You've seen it before. You saw it when we came up with the GSAs back in the early 2000s. You saw it when we were working with funding models, and you continue to see it when we move forward as an elected government in October of 2023. It's really, really important. You are the people that do the work with our kids every day. And what we've been hearing lately is the challenges that have been created by the cuts and underfunding to our system. The facts are the facts. We know that many of us are dealing with less human resources than we had in 2016. The minister can say what he wants when it comes to these so-called funding pieces, but what's happened is that you haven't really felt the positive impact in your classroom. What you need is a real government that will value your voice at the table, instead of just listening and then going on and doing what we're going to do anyway. I think that's been the experience of everybody in this room. And so we will reset that relationship and ensure that your voice is heard, because it's an important one.
Thank you very much. Mr. Owasco.
Thanks, Richard. Relationships. Relationships with Manitoba Teachers Society. I have a great respect for those of you that are sitting in those chairs today. Just over 20 years ago, I sat where you are as a representative for my teachers association in Sunrise, and prior to that, Agassiz. It comes down to collaboration and consultation. Manitoba Teachers Society has a seat at the table in the Department of Education and Early Childhood Learning on every committee that we have. We are nonstop listening and working with Manitoba Teachers Society. Happens all the time. Are we going to agree on absolutely everything? No. Are we agreeing on quite a few things? Absolutely. And I would like to give Nathan a bit of kudos for taking on that presidency role. I know I had a close relationship with James Bedford and Norm prior to them. We talk about special needs funding. The $17 million put towards special needs funding over and above the funded money going to school divisions has come from those consultations, working with teachers in the front lines. I'm a public school teacher. I've been there, I've worked in student services. I've worked on all levels of education in the K-12 system. We are showing evidence of a listening and making things happen government. So I'd like to thank you for that time, and I no doubt I'll have some opportunity to rebuttal in a few seconds.
Thanks very much. Mr. McIntyre, 2 minutes.
Thank you. Have you ever been to a meeting for consultation and then come out of that meeting and 2 weeks later it's like, thank you very much for coming in, but we're going in this direction? That's what consultation is with the Pallister-Stephenson government. We need a refresh here in Manitoba. It's quite simple. The two parties on my right and left have just traded decades and decades and decades and decades of grasping for power and trying to hold on to power, and we're at a crisis now that all those decades have now poured into the schools. And what are you going to do? Well, hit refresh. Manitoba Liberals are ready to take that on. We're ready to sit down with Manitoba teachers and Manitoba Teachers Society and start afresh. It would be nice if we were able to work together and move forward. And maybe it is collaboratively, but it's not going to be a consultation. We're 2 weeks down the road and it's going to say, oh yeah, thanks very much, but we're going in this direction. I promise you that. We need to work together in order to talk about funding. We need to work together to talk about kids. We need to work together to talk about where education is going to go in this province in the next decade. And I would be able to, well, maybe I'll be able, I never know, October 3rd is coming, but the Liberal Party of Manitoba will be able to work with you. I know it. Thank you.
1 minute rebuttals. Mr. Owasco?
Oh, I'm first this time. Thanks, Richard. So you keep hearing it from the Liberals and NDP. Consultations, collaboration. Well, we're the only government that's actually shown evidence of that. We are working with Manitoba Teachers Society. We are listening. We have them, you, at the table of every committee that we have. Couple examples. I'll bring it up. My colleagues brought it up. You think I'm scared of bringing it up. Bill 64. We listened to Manitobans and took it off the table. Premier Heather Stevenson, one of the first things she did was took Bill 64 off the table because we heard from Manitobans, not just educators, not just MSBA. We heard from Manitobans. A collaborative, consultative government does those types of things. What the NDP did was they sat in committee for 5 or 6 days over the PST and said, you know what, hey, thanks for showing up, but we're jumping your PST. We're jacking it up. And if we didn't take power in 2016, it would have been up to 10% by now.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre, rebuttal, 1 minute. Go.
Thank you. Bill 64, Bill 35.
Check, check.
Yeah,
Consultations.
that's consultation? Wow. Yeah, I'd go with the Liberals.
I would hope you would.
Thanks very much. 1 minute, Mr. Altsmeyer.
Well, thank you, Richard. It's interesting when the minister talks about consulting and collaborating with school divisions, does that mean that out of that consulting and collaboration, we had cuts to nutrition programs, cuts to full-day kindergarten and school divisions throughout the province? Does that mean you bring forth Bill 64 that would have ravaged the public school system in this province? Does that mean that right now in Pembina Trails, they've had to endure a cut so that they can't fully staff a high school that they're going to be opening? These are things that are realities that are hitting the ground right now. The crisis that my colleague in the middle talked about was created in 2016 when you began underfunding public ed. This is what we're having now. 7 years on, here we are. Where we are. Many of us are feeling a crisis, but there is a way out, and we'll certainly be that party that provides that direction. Thank you.
Question 5. It's going rather quickly, don't you find that?
really.
Do you find it's going quickly?
Sure.
Yeah? Okay.
My 1 minute was.
Well, I'll see if I can give you a minute 5. Manitoba, like many other regions, faces unique challenges that significantly impact the quality and accessibility of public education. Here's the question. If your party forms government October 3rd, what are 3 key educational objectives you envision accomplishing within the next 4 years to enhance the quality, accessibility, equity, and inclusivity of our public education system? Mr. Owasco, you have 2 minutes.
Thanks, thanks, Richard, and that's a great question. 3 things that we're going to be moving forward on. First of all, when we form government, despite what my 2 colleagues to the left of me say, when we talk about food and nutrition, the NDP had many years to increase the funding to food and nutrition. Just recently, we doubled the funds to the Child Nutrition Council of Manitoba to help with students. Do we have more work to do? Absolutely we do. We're going to be doing a funding model review. We're going to be launching the new funding model. And again, that comes from consultations and collaboration with all of you, plus other education partners throughout this great province of ours. We want to make sure that across this great province of ours, we have fair, equitable funding, but also we want to make sure that unlike the Liberals and up till just a couple weeks ago, the NDP, we want to make sure that students across this great province of ours are receiving fair, equitable education no matter where they live. And it's not based on who's got the most high rises or the industrial parks in their communities. We want to make sure that it's done right, and that's why we're taking the time to get it done. The K-12 Commission, which was done shortly after 2016 when we formed government, first Royal Commission on Education in this province since 1959. We listened to over 30,000 Manitobans and chimed in. We came up with the K-12 action plan. We're making sure that we're moving. And what did we hear from Manitobans? Improved literacy, numeracy, Indigenous education and inclusion, and we're getting it done. And I look forward to continuing it after the October 3rd election.
Thank you very much. 2 minutes, Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you. As we head into October, as we head into September and towards October 3rd, I want you to remember 3 things that the Manitoba Liberal Party will bring to government. Number 1, universal nutrition program for all students. We're going to collaborate with the Child Nutrition Program of Manitoba in order to deliver it to more than whom they are delivering it to now. Number 2, and I think you're going to hear this from all 3 of us, equitable and dependable funding. It's not going to be 1 year rich and 1 year poor. We're looking at equitable, dependable funding year after year after year. And one of the major points of our platform for education is to address in the early years, as soon as possible, K-2, assessments, diagnoses, and interventions for students who have learning disabilities or maybe physical disabilities, and reading. Through that funding, then we're going to be able to see that growth year on year on year. And those interventions are going to be funded, and they're going to continue until the student doesn't need it, or if the student continues to need it into grade 12. 3 pieces of our platform. Please keep that in mind.
Thank you very much. Mr. Altsmeyer.
Well, thank you again, Richard. First and foremost, we have to reduce class sizes. That's going to be a major part of our plank. But remember what I said earlier, not at the expense of having larger class sizes down the line. We can't do that. That takes too much out of people. The second thing we'll do, and you know about this, is that we're going to feed kids in school. That's going to happen. And it will happen collaboratively. I know we hear that word all the time, but this is an important piece. It can't be left behind. We know the importance of this. Nutrition programs affect positively a child's success at school. That can't be underscored anymore. The Poverty and Education Task Force did it. K-12 Commission on Education did it. There was a commission in the late 90s that said the same thing. It's time for action, and you'll get action with the Manitoba NDP government. The other piece I also want to respond to, of course, is ongoing, predictable, stable funding. It can't be feast or famine in this province. This is an investment. This is a sacred trust. Public education is a sacred trust in this province. That's why we're here today. We take it seriously. It can't be politicized to the point now where we're making decisions based upon whether or not a finance minister is doling out checks to rich millionaires and billionaires that are out of province. That's ridiculous. You're breaking that sacred trust by doing that. Public education needs to be invested in, and we're going to ensure that it gets done properly. Now, I do want to mention something. We have the early development instrument that has been used and will continue to be used. We'll make sure that gets funded properly, the EDI, and we know that part. So thank you for your time on this important question.
Thank you very much. We have rebuttals, but I was just listening to the promises made here, and I think I remember a debate 25 years ago where the promises were fair and equitable funding so that Thompson, South St. Vital, St. Laurent would all have that right to an equal education. I remember, boy, do I remember food and nutrition programs, that they would be available at all schools. That was 25 years ago. And I do remember about trying to improve numeracy and literacy 25 years ago. And, you know, I'm not cynical, I'm hopeful, but I'm hoping that we get stuff done. Rebuttals, and maybe mindful of that it's not easy. It's absolutely not easy, and you just don't do it like that. But boy, you got to work in that direction. 1 minute, Mr. McIntyre, you can take a minute, 5 seconds.
Thank you. Nathan, maybe you can correct me. 8 years ago, a speech by a former president, James Bedford, talked about nutrition programs in schools. About 8 years ago. Okay, so it took that long. It took that long in order to get this on platforms. All 3 of our platforms have it now. And Richard, you're talking about 25 years. Yeah. Finally, we see the importance of students working in the classroom with full bellies. And that leads to results, and we know that. There's really nothing that I can rebut in terms of what the others are promising. You know the Stephenson, the Pallister-Stephenson government's track record, and you know what they're promising. The NDP.
You know you see him.
The NDP are saying, oh well, you know, no more checks to the billionaires and the millionaires. The only thing they're saying is going to be different is that instead of putting a stamp on it, they're going to make direct deposits.
All right, Mr. McIntyre, thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Owasco.
That's a good way to end.
1 minute, 5 seconds. Go ahead.
Thanks, Richard. Just quickly on the class size composition. I mean, we all have been teachers, and some of us quite a few more years than others. But we've all seen the argument of class size versus composition. I've got a quote here. It says, "Composition is everything. In many ways, it is more important than class size." Who said that? Former NDP Education Minister Drew Caldwell. It is. It's up for debate on whether that works. Class sizes really have not changed a whole lot in the last 12, 15 years. But I do want to address a couple things. We talk about stronger families, making life more affordable for families so that we have stronger students coming to us on a day-to-day basis. We want to make sure that that is happening. We want to make sure that it's more affordable. The candidates to the left of me are talking about food and nutrition programs, but at the same time, they're also want to take those dollars and cents off your tables that you're receiving for the property tax rebate. Both parties, I'm glad that Nello mentioned it, but the early years evaluation tool,
Time.
we're already doing it, and the Liberals are now promising to do it. It just looks like both parties, their platforms are, we're going to do what the PCs are already doing because we
Mr.
never
Owasco,
had to
thank
do
you
it
so very
earlier.
much. Mr.
Thanks,
Altemeyer,
thanks,
you've got
Richard.
1 minute. Go ahead.
I didn't ring the bell. Recess is over.
Well, thank you, Richard. I'm glad I have the last word. I will say fair and equitable looks different in different parts of the province. The Poverty and Education Task Force is very clear on that. We have to take this seriously, and it can't be education that does it on its own. This has to be a whole-of-government approach. Healthcare, education, justice, families need to be all involved to finally deal with the scourge that is childhood poverty in our province. Leading the country in this thing is not good. The challenge is right there in front of us. We see it every day in our classrooms. Let's deal with this challenge together and get it done. It can't be just educators that do it, though. We need help. So let's involve all of government to finally deal with this and get it done, because that's going to create a quality education system, an education system that is equitable, and one that is inclusive.
Time.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much. We have closing statements, 2 minutes each. It'll go Mr. McIntyre, Mr. Altemeyer, and Mr. Owasco. 2 minutes, Mr. McIntyre. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I mentioned this before, that after COVID and remote learning and the changes and the new rules and the old rules and the newer rules and the old, and okay, we went from pillar to post. And at this point, we need some bold actions. We need some bold actions to change where education is going, how education is funded, and to make sure that funding is there when needed. So, invest in that early testing, diagnosis, and interventions. Equitable funding for schools needing the resources, and let them get the resources. Protecting the rights of the LGBTQ2S kids. Giving school divisions the autonomy and the ability to attract and retain staff. Ensuring that educators have adequate mental health supports. Sorry about that. Addressing ventilation and air quality in schools, and an action plan for air conditioning. The NDP and Conservatives cannot be trusted to do this. They have had decades to correct it, and we are living with the results of longitudinal neglect and underfunding. Manitoba Liberals look forward to working with all of you as teachers, as principals, and as parents. We want to work together so that children are excited about going to school because they are finding it interesting and challenging, and because their teacher is healthy, their school is healthy, and their successes are epic. The Manitoba Liberal Party has the plan, the team, and the solutions to get the job done. The Manitoba Liberal Party is focused on Manitoba and Manitobans every day. Thank you to the Manitoba Teachers Society for this opportunity. Thank you, Richard, and to my colleagues on stage, bon chance. Real change is possible, and it starts with your one vote at a time. Thank you for considering the Manitoba Liberals on October 30th. Oh, no, don't do that. On October 3rd.
Whoops.
Boy, that's
Thank
a
you.
long campaign, Ian.
It's a long campaign.
Holy moly.
Yeah,
But we're ready for it.
but we're ready
Don't
for
worry.
it. Absolutely.
Remember, we talked about numeracy earlier.
Thank you.
2 minutes, Mr.
And I'm a
Altemeyer.
math teacher. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.
Well, thank you, Richard. As educators, we work every day to meet the needs of every student. We find the resources to make sure they're not hungry. We find the resources to get them the school supplies they need and the winter boots that they need to get to class and enjoy recess. But you're up against a lot. Poverty, cuts, Heather Stephenson's PCs that cut our schools for 7 years. Every teacher wants the best for their students, absolutely. So does every family, so does every community. But under this government, our kids aren't getting the best, and teachers are not being listened to. It's time to change that, and with this election you can. You can vote for a Manitoba NDP and get a real partner in public education. Students deserve better than underfunded classrooms. They deserve manageable class sizes, more attention from you, their teacher, and more support when they need it. This government has failed on all of those fronts. I would like to thank MTS and everybody in this room for the invitation to be here today, my colleagues on stage. This is an important election. We know what it takes. We just now need to act. Because if we don't invest in our kids while they're in school, we pay a much higher price later on. Being an educator is a very rewarding career. We've all said it up here on stage. It is the honor of our lives. I really believe that. But under this government, I know it's getting harder for you in the classroom. In this election, vote for a strong public school system and a government that works with you so that we can focus on what kids need right now. Together, we'll make life better for everybody in our classrooms and all Manitobans. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, everybody on the panel. This has been fantastic. Have a great afternoon.
2 minutes, Mr. Owasco.
Thanks, Richard. And on more than one occasion, my colleague, Mr. Altamar from the NDP, had mentioned the Poverty and Education Task Force. Just
Yes,
on the
this is
record,
important.
it was our government that brought forward the Poverty and Education Task Force,
Enacted.
which then went and collaborated and consulted with each and every one of you and our other education partners all across this great province of ours. To wrap up, I want to start. I've already started, but I want to thank Richard Cloutier for moderating this afternoon's debate. I want to thank Manitoba Teachers Society for hosting us, and of course all of you for taking time out of your very busy summer. And as I know personally, the dreams are starting to happen about getting back into the classroom this coming September. So thank you all for taking the time to join us here for your Summer Institute. I want to thank you not just for listening to my colleagues and myself share perspectives and thoughts, but I also want to recognize on how hard of work you do as educators. We know educators are the heart and soul of our school system, and I remember working overtime for my students during my teaching career, like what all of you do on a day-to-day basis. Even when you're not working, your mind is generating ideas that you take with you into the classroom to motivate and challenge students to learn. You see our kids for the majority of the day, but you care about them around the clock. Manitoba children and their families are grateful to you. I also want to reiterate a few of the ways Progressive Conservative government under the leadership of Heather Stephenson is going to strengthen the school system. We will bring in the new funding model and make sure that during the transition, all school divisions receive increases. We will improve on literacy, numeracy, and Indigenous education and inclusion. We have the plans, and we will get them done with all of your help. We will consult on rights for parents, because better informed parents means stronger families, which means stronger students.
Time.
Your PC future government want to make sure that students succeed no matter where they live, their cultural background, or their own personal circumstance. Thanks for your time this afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your summer. Recess is over.
That was recess? No, we got recess coming up. Thank you to the three of you. Thank you for a very engaging audience. I really appreciate that very much. It was only camera people that left the room. And thanks to the three of you. I have to reiterate, it takes a lot to stand up, a lot to run, a lot to be accountable, a lot to put up with the likes of me. So thank you again. A big, big thunderous round of applause for all three. And we'll give it back to El Presidente. I have a show to do. I start at 3. Thanks, Richard. Thank you very much. Thanks again. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you again. Thank you very much. That was fun. You bet. Thank you.
On behalf of the Manitoba Teachers Federation, Society, Union, thank you, Richard, for moderating the debate.
That was the literacy part. That
Yeah. So we have a short break, and then you can proceed to your choice sessions. Thank you very much.